let me introduce you to our brilliant panel. Today's session is, well, it started off really thinking, as I was interviewing, some of these brilliant people, it started off really thinking about extra services, whether people are adjusting their services. So we ended up titling this session Adaptability and Expectations. So on that score, we assembled this brilliant panel of people who I will introduce you to one by one. First of all, Selina Wakeling. Selina, it's great to see you. Thank you for being with us. Selina is the Global Head of Sales at the Cheval Collection. If you don't know the Cheval Collection, they are a very high-end corporate and service apartment housing in London and Edinburgh. Recently, you just opened in Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. Very exciting.
Very exciting.
Congratulations, that's great.
Thank you.
Jennipher Christensen is the Managing Director of IPR. Jennipher, it's lovely to see you. Thank you for being here. If you didn't catch my interview with Jennipher over the last couple of months, it's really worth taking a look at. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Maria Kouri, always wonderful to see you from Corporate Relocations in Greece, in Athens, on a beautiful Athens afternoon. Welcome, it's great to see you. Elizabeth Sawyer, CEO of Bennett International. Thank you very much for being with us. Elizabeth's going to bring the education aspect to this. And of course, if you don't know Peggy Love, you certainly should do by now. Peggy is the strategic consultant to EuRA for intellectual content and is in charge of our conference content and will be going through the submissions for our fall forum, which is a free to attend Seville. Anybody who's booked in for the Seville conference in March, we're running an online couple of days of creative sessions, and Peggy will be dealing with that. Peggy also ran one of the United States' most successful destination service provider companies for many years. And we are very, very lucky to have her in our corner as strategic consultant. And that's all you're going to hear from me. I will now hand you to Peggy. Peggy, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dom. And thanks to everybody for participating in this briefing today. So before we start, first of all, I want to thank Dom and Tad and the EuRA board, the EuRA team, for keeping us all so well connected. That's how come we're doing all of this. And I think it's been really great. So I think I can speak for all of the EuRA members out there that we just need to convey our thanks to you for doing that. So the what's come out of this, the overarching theme, I think, has been a spirit of collaboration and sharing. And this is what I've heard through all of the interviews that Don referred to that that he's done through the past 5 months. I guess it's getting on to 6 months. And I think with that, keeping that spirit in mind, that's why we wanted to kind of put together this panel that's a representation of some sort of different industry sectors. I mean, we all work in the same big industry, and we all do need, and we always have had to collaborate. We've wanted to and work together because many of us have all the same clients. So I think that this has just exacerbated the need for that, this situation that we have right now. And I love what I've seen that's come out of it. So I think keep that spirit in mind while we sort of have a discussion. And really, we want this to be a discussion. Excuse me, as Dom said, we want to hear your thoughts after each speaker. So I'm going to start with Selina.
Hi there.
That's Selina. So your properties sound awesome, by the way. I can't wait to visit.
You're welcome anytime, Peggy.
Thank you. So what we'd like to know, I think, can you just talk a little bit about what changes were required of you based on, the industry and your company, and based on laws and what everybody has had to put into place during this crisis, which is what it is. And when you talk about that, I know you'll mention what you've had to do to adapt. Everybody's had to adapt in so many different ways, and we really want to hear what you've done in terms of your processes and your programs that you already had in place. Maybe you've implemented some new programs creatively, and just please share with us how sort of that journey that you've been on since early March, or maybe it was even before then, and and then I'll have one more question for you when you're finished with that.
Okay. Well, we've been quite lucky at Cheval Residences, Cheval Collection, because we've been open for the entire time throughout the COVID-19 crisis. And always what we've wanted to do is to ensure our guests minimise their anxiety and make sure they feel that they're living in a safe, relaxed, clean place. So we've put a number of measures in place. There's actually a 4-page document I have here, but I'm not obviously going to read all of those out. Everything is slightly easier with service departments because of the space within the apartments, because there's some outside areas, because there's fully fitted kitchens. So we put in place a guest journey, which we didn't previously have as such, where before the guest arrives, they within the booking procedures, there's some procedures in place. So when they come to the property, we make sure there's limited exposure for both the guests and the in-house colleagues. For example, we have Team A and Team B colleagues working on property. So Team A would work for 7 days, and this would include a general manager, someone from housekeeping, maintenance, front of house teams, and they would either stay on property or they would drive to work in a private car every day. And this was to minimise them going on public transport and them staying in-house. And then they would rotate every 7 days. We've also arranged for guests to be picked up from the airport to the residence in a sanitised car. We have things like peace of mind stickers. So when the apartment's being completely cleaned, there'll be a sticker put on the front of the door, so the guest knows on arrival that no one's entered that since it's been completely cleaned. So there's a couple of things that we've put in place. With regards to change with regards to what the laws are, we had a minimum stay of 14 nights. So previously in some of our residences, a minimum stay of 1 night, so that was changed to 14 nights. All of the gyms on property, of course, have been closed for the entire time. We've had back of house, the canteens have been closed, and also, as I said, the tag teams. We've also tried to put in place for our guests some creative procedures or incentives, if you like, to take into account for the 14-day quarantine ruling. We've said that anybody staying 90 nights or more in some cases will be allowed to take the first 2 weeks as complimentary. We've had a client that's taken a couple of floors at one of our residences so that they can ensure that all their employees can stay on property and work on property. So we've adapted the apartments to make sure they have high-speed internet and they've got everything they need within the apartment. So there's just a few things that we've done where we've made some changes and then we've tried to implement some other points as well to assist the guests.
So, do you feel that these changes that you've made will stay in place? I know that nobody can predict the future, but looking ahead,
I think,
what are your thoughts, Selina, about the changes and what you've implemented and really how, if you can, predict as best you can what?
Yeah, of course. And I think that a lot of the procedures will be, certainly the health and safety will be in place for some time. But we also think the whole, the work-live will stay in place within one area, because we're finding that corporate companies are not necessarily wanting their employees to be together, but not actually wanting them necessarily to use public transport or travel to work. So the whole idea of people being able to work and stay within their apartments. One of the things that's been a service that we've had is the Cheval app, and that's played a major part actually in the communication that we've been able to have with our guests and with certain departments. So each guest will be able to can download the app. And then they can reach any department they want. So if they need extra housekeeping, if they need something in regards to maintenance, if they have a package delivered, they can speak to the front desk. And in some cases, because of everything that's been going on now, we've had requests where the guests would like to isolate their package for like 72 hours before it's actually delivered to their apartment. So yeah, it's kind of like changing and adapting all the time. But these are kind of the main things I think will stay in place.
So have you, I just happened to think of this, have you put any measures in place to do with the housekeeping staff and maybe the turnover of people that come into the properties, not the residents, about testing?
Yeah, so when the guests arrive within the apartments, there's all of the usual sanitizers. We are putting in place, there is actually within the residences a voluntary temperature check that the guests can have, but that's completely voluntary. But with regards to what our colleagues are doing, they are temperature checks every day. They're coming into work, and there is all of the normal things that all of the other service departments are doing as well, which with regards to the whole sanitisation and making sure the common areas are clean and well maintained on an hourly basis.
Sure. And so that's certainly following the laws in every country and every state, and at least in our country, it's different. Wow.
Anybody have a question for Selina? I mean, Selina and I, we talked, and you know, it was interesting how, you know, we were saying there's that balance between obviously wanting the guests to feel safe and protected and secure and not freaking them out at the same time. It's a very fine balance, right? Does anybody have a question they'd like to put to Selina? Either raise your hand if you'd like to speak, or just put a note in the chat box. And don't forget, if you think of something later on, we'll do a Q&A at the end. Okay, I don't see anybody's hands up at the moment. So Peggy, over to you.
Okay, so let's move on to, let's leave the UK and move to the US. And Jennipher, I'm going to ask you the same questions, and I know that it's probably maybe a little more difficult for you to speak concisely about what's going on in the United States, because every state, as everybody knows, is completely different, and the laws and rules everywhere are changing by the moment almost. I know there are a couple of really new ones that have just been signed in the United States. So keeping that in mind, what along the way, what changes have you made with your company, you know, based on really how your business has gone and how the laws have required you to make changes? And then and how have you put into place, and I know you have several creative programs that possibly you already had in place, but that have become more important during this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So I sometimes I feel like this needs not be said, but it's something that comes up quite a bit. And I think the number one change we had to implement and to remind our team and our consultants, our network of area consultants throughout the US, is the most important thing is changing our mindset. And, you know, we were all faced with the same situation right away. And to realize that, yeah, this isn't business as usual, and this isn't what we were used to doing, but you know what, we can do this. It's just going to look different. So once we got over the mindset of, oh no, what are we going to do? We can't do this. Everything's going to come to a screeching halt. I think it opened up everybody's ability to be a little bit creative and to come up with ways of how can we still help the folks that we're working with. And there's some really great solutions out there. So some of the changes, some practical changes that beyond mindset and health and safety and making sure that we adhere to the state orders or the local municipal orders really had to do with health. So we have shifted most of our services to a virtual service platform. We had the ability to do that before COVID hit, but it's really become a necessary adaptation right now. And I think it's actually working really well. And to be quite honest, it's quite a silver lining coming out of COVID that we have the ability to do this. So looking at virtual services, and when I say virtual services, we still consider face-to-face virtual. We have Zoom, we have FaceTime, we have all of the ability to still do this and to see our relocating employees and to see who they're working with and to make that connection. So we really leveraged technology, and this isn't cutting edge, you know, super high-end technology. This is technology that we all have access to. So aside from going virtual and using technology, I think those are the biggest kind of overarching adaptations we've made as a company. But we've also had to step up, and this isn't to say that we haven't always set expectations. I think we all, as an industry, setting expectations and having really good communication has been key. But one of the things that we've noticed is it's important that we had to change the conversation around expectations, and to help alleviate some concerns or uncertainties, because when everybody is uncertain, I mean, moving is uncertain as it is, but moving during COVID, and how that's going to look for the relocating employee. So I really liked some of the topics that Selina talked about, because oftentimes corporate housing is the first place that the relocating employee lands. So we've started talking more to some of the service partners that we're working side by side to find out what they're doing, what we can complement, and really having that partnership conversation to make sure that it is that seamless transition. So when they arrive, they're going into corporate housing. What is that going to look for them? How are they going to get their groceries if they have to be in quarantine? And so concierge services is something that we've always offered, but it hasn't really been a big offering. And it's become something that's a little bit more critical now. So when somebody arrives, how are they going to get their groceries delivered? What are they going to do to be able to set up their temp housing or their permanent housing so they can work from home if that's needed? So really shifting from that traditional accompanied, we're going to pick you up, we're going to have a meeting with you, and then we're going to take you to go look at properties. And we've had to shift that. The other thing that we've had to do is acknowledge that there are going to be some delayed services. And how can we work around that with the relocating employees? So one of the challenges is obtaining a social security and getting their driver's license. Those are delayed services because the government offices are open on a very limited basis, if at all. And then schools are a really big issue. And Elizabeth's going to talk about that in a little bit. But people are really uncertain. What is that going to look like if my family moves and everybody's doing things remotely and we can't get out and meet folks? So how can we still help these families get integrated into their communities while they're sitting at home? So we've stepped up that process a little bit in terms of having some type of community support in locations, virtual chats with different relocating employees and bringing them together if they're interested. And it's interesting, that's something that we did years ago, but it kind of fell off. And now it's something that people are thirsty for. They really want to come up with alternative ideas, and they're more comfortable with Zoom applications. So we've also spent more time putting services in place pre-arrival and doing things pre-arrival that maybe in the past we would wait until the relocating employee got here. There's some great options in terms of pre-arrival banking. Let's not wait and take you physically into the bank. Let's get your banking set up before you come. So that's one less touch point of having to have contact. The other thing that, so residential services, home finding, has always been considered an essential service. So that has not closed down, but it just looks really different. It takes a lot more planning. There's no more on the fly, we're gonna go out, see these properties. If these don't work, we're gonna shift and go see these other properties. It takes not only planning and advance appointments more than it ever did, because a lot of times landlords aren't gonna show properties, or apartment buildings just might not be open for walk-in appointments. So that expectation has had to be set. The other thing is how we show properties and how we go into properties and provide tours. Oftentimes it's only the relocating employee or the person that's going to be renting the property that can go into the property and look at the house. So we have actually asked for whoever the listing agent is to prepare the property before they come. So have doors open, have lights on, have closet doors open so that there's less physical contact, touching doorknobs, touching light switches. And maybe we'll go in ahead of time, have a look, wait for them outside, and then when they come out, we can talk and discuss. So there's, creative or not, there's always workarounds. And I think I've been really impressed with our area consultant network. They have come up with some ideas that are just brilliant to make this work. And I think work effectively, not just to make do, but to really work effectively. So you had asked Do I think that this will move forward in some of these processes that we've implemented and adapted to? Absolutely. They're efficient, they're cost effective. And I think some of the relocating employees really like that efficiency and being able to do things a little bit more on their own. We're working with some savvy people, and they don't necessarily always need the amount of accompaniment that we provided in the past. Even with area orientation tours, we put together some really effective virtual area orientation tours where we pre-map the route, we put points of interest, we put information, we can even add videos and say, hey, here is downtown Golden, here's a little video clip as they're going through it, and give some information and history about downtown Golden. And they like that. They can do it at their own pace. If they get hungry, they can stop versus their area consultant saying, no, we have a schedule, we have to stay on. Yeah, so I think that there's some silver linings here, and that we've all kind of had to use some different muscles and stretch our mindset and be a little bit more willing to go, how can we do this better? So as inconvenient as it's been, and I know it's a hit to probably most of our businesses, I do think that there's some exciting opportunities that are coming out of this.
Well, I think you touched on something that's really important to me, and I'm just sitting here thinking, I always sort of think in terms of what have we picked up again that we used to do, a long time ago when programs and services were more robust and companies were paying for more, maybe a 5 or even a 6-day program, and how all of that's been shaped so much. But what I love that you said was how important, or more important, because it's always been important, the pre-arrival services have become.
Yeah.
So I can see that possibly that with the application, with the Zoom application, and being able to have more than a telephone call or a silly, just a needs assessment form that they somehow fill out online, or whatever they do for the consultant to put together the programs. I love that, because I think I've always felt that's probably one of the most important kind of components of our services. And I'm sorry, I'm not one of the panelists, but I love what you said. And I think that's, in my mind, what's going on is that the silver lining really is, let's look back a little, way back, and see what kinds of programs are more applicable now, that back in the day we didn't have Zoom or a way to kind of get to know the consultant, because I think that's what you're saying, is that's really important too. So
yeah, and we had a really good example of that where I think people are in such a rush sometimes to leave, and they think, when I land at my destination, I can pop in wherever and get what I need. With the limitations on that, it's just not possible. And so we've had the opportunity and the willingness to have the conversation, some of the relocating employees, about preparing, and let's talk about how this is going to look. And, those maybe prescriptions or medications that you need, it's super important that you have those in advance filled. Don't think that you're going to arrive, pop into a doctor's office, get your prescription, and go have it filled. It's just not that easy anymore. So that was just one example we had recently come up, because they thought, well, can you just take us to a pharmacy, or can you get these prescriptions filled? And that's just not possible. So we want to make sure people don't land and have these challenges, because it's already going to be challenging. So let's ease that process.
Great. Thank you.
Does anybody have a question? Just raise your hand or pop a note into the chat box. That would be great. Otherwise, we'll continue. That's fascinating. Thanks, Jennipher. I mean, we talked about that ourselves, but it is, like you say, it's so weird how we are an industry, and a lot of people in the industry very much like us. We like to plan, and you suddenly realize that actually, there's so many parts of our lives that are unplanned. Like you say, you can just go to a doctor's office, get your prescription, go to the supermarket, do all of that stuff, and now suddenly we've really got to think about it.
Yeah.
Peggy.
Okay. So let's go back to Europe, to Maria, but we'll stay with destination services companies. And Maria, if you'll just kind of pick up with the same questions, what changes have you had to make based on laws in your country and things that have changed? And then, you know, some things that maybe you wanted to make, but then also some that were required for really the industry and your company. And then which of the programs that you already had in place became less important, or kind of just shifted a little bit, like Jennipher was talking about. Maybe some things became more important in the process, maybe in the timeline. And what have you done creatively to you and your team to accommodate all of the changes that we've all experienced?
Thank you, Peggy. Again, I need to say before I start that we really are in an amazing industry, and I really need to repeat what Jennipher said. I mean, the same thing that goes on in the other part of the planet, in the US, the same is in Greece. Work-wise, this thing, COVID, messed with our psychology and our work. So let me take the psychology part first. Human beings, and Dom, I'm sorry I've said that so many times, but human beings are very adaptive creatures. So at the beginning, we were really scared on the lockdown, on what is going to happen. So priorities changed, and our life changed, and we realized that first we had to protect ourselves, we had to protect our people, but we had to protect our clients as well. And we felt that first of all, the priority is that you are human, and these are human beings being in a different country. So we really felt that we needed to protect them and to put a different hat and see how we can help them in feeling better. So first of all, so psychology-wise, I need to say, and I need to say to the rest of the planet as well, that life continues. Like in Greece, we're not on a lockdown. Today there was another uplift of the measure of when you're outside, you can sit more than 6 people in a table. And I can tell you that we are starting to live again normally, but in a different reality. Different reality, I mean that every person has to take care of their own responsibility of protecting themselves. So again, work-wise, what we did is that, as Jennipher said as well, we virtual services became first in our assistance. So what we realized is that in order to continue to build trust on the client, we already had to be ready to propose alternatives on how the service will be best delivered. And this is something that I think that it's here to stay. And this is something that we stress with our team when we meet as well. And I'm very proud of this and the team because they always come back with new ideas. Because things have become really on a case-by-case basis on everything. So each service, even if you have some guidelines, you have your flow charts, you know how to do the service, you still need to show to your assignee that you can change it every moment if that is needed to, if it needs to be changed. So this is what we are doing. And as Jennipher said, yes, and Dom, we are really in an industry that we like to be proactive in order to welcome the assignee when they come to the country. And now we see that we still need to be proactive when we can. Like, for example, doing some testing with the public authorities or booking some appointments with the public authorities. So if you can plan something so that the assignee does not have to be with many people when presence is needed. But on the other hand, you need to be quick on making decisions. So our company is a small team. We are 10 people, and this is quite easy because we want to be aligned all the time, and Teams and virtual and technology computer is helping on this. With chats and things, you can really be aligned. I believe that bigger companies will need to think more on how to deliver their service more efficiently on this. So
how about the future? What do you see in the future? I think it's great that your country is getting back to normal. I think we long for that a little bit here in the United States, but so it is. So what about the future? How do you feel about, you said some really interesting things about, again, services that in my mind have always been so important. I mean, the essence of what we do is customized services, right? So anyway, how about what your thoughts are about the future and anything that you've changed in your company?
Yeah.
Based on some of the great things that you said, will they stay in place just in a normal situation?
Yeah, well, Peggy, I believe and I'm sure that COVID is here to stay. And I'm not saying COVID, I'm saying that a new reality. I don't know if it's going to be another, anyway, we will need, and history has shown this, that whatever there is something that comes, I don't think that it will disappear and we will forget about it. So let's do what Jennipher said. Let's take some of the exciting opportunities that this thing has taught us, and let's keep those. So virtual, well, I believe that the thing that we need to stress is connectivity between people. Human beings are people, we need to connect. So even if with COVID and virtual services is a great thing, what I see is that per experience, some sort of connectiveness and presence need to exist. But what I also saw is that in the company, when you know somebody, this person can't continue their work remotely, and it is perfectly fine. So I think that this will stay. But you need to meet every once in a while to get this feeling
absolutely
warm. You need to get the vibes of the other person. So this has to do with the client as well. So it's very important that you see the client at the beginning. At some point, you have to see the client. Of course, always in a protected environment, pre-planned, so that the client feels safe and feels that he's being protected. But you need to see the client. And then whatever you can do virtually, do it virtually. When you feel that something is not going very well, meet the client again. Because the human presence, the human aura, I don't know how to say it, cannot be exchanged with any virtual thing. Does it make
absolutely
sense? Yeah, for the future.
Absolutely sense to me. I think it probably does to everybody.
It's amazing, right? Because I mean, I remember saying when we were in Dubrovnik, I remember standing on stage and saying, you know, the adaptability of our industry, the creativity, the way that the positivity that you can turn, you know, what, like you said, like 4 months ago was terrifying into something which is bringing new opportunities is amazing. So thank you both for that. I have a great question in the chat box from Shada. Thank you very much, Shada. It's a tricky one. I'm going to ask, are you facing any pressure to relook at pricing? PPE and safety measures are an additional cost which only increase prices for us. But could we look at new payment terms if there are price corrections requested by the client? How are you dealing with this? I think, Selina, I'd ask you that first because your fixed costs must have changed dramatically.
Yeah, so we have, as part of the actual welcome package, we are putting face masks and sanitizers and things like that within the apartments, and we're doing all of that. That's no additional charge to the customer. Because what we're trying to do is make sure that the customer, the booker, feels comfortable when they come to stay. So yeah, whatever we need to do, we're trying to adapt to whatever that is. But there's no additional costing for that for the client.
Very impressive. Jennipher, have you had any of those conversations around pricing?
Yeah, for the most part, because we've shifted to a virtual price structure during this time, we shifted virtually with our area consultants as well as with our clients. So our clients are thrilled because it's less of a fee if we aren't taking into account the travel time. Now, it doesn't mean that it's no fee, which I know that some folks think, well, if you're not meeting them, why are you charging us? We still really respect our area consultants' time and the resources and everything that they're doing. And if we are talking to a relocating employee, there's certainly time, and we consider that face time. So for the most part, it's been a positive shift. Our area consultants, we weren't sure how they were going to react to this because, oh no, are we going to get paid less? They actually embraced it. A lot of them are really happy to be able to work virtually, and they recognize that their expenses are a little less. So the shift didn't make a difference to them. They still, a lot of our area consultants maybe have childcare issues. They can't go out and meet folks right now because the traditional summer camps are no longer in existence, or whatever they were doing. Their kids are at school, they're having to learn from home. So it's actually worked out really well. The one place that we've had to have conversations that were perhaps a little tricky, but surprisingly and thankfully, some of our clients that are really good partners, we didn't get a whole lot of pushback on, was invoicing for services that were complete mid-authorization. And maybe we had started services last year, last fall, had meetings, had arrival or pre-arrival look-see visits that we did in person. The folks went home, and then they couldn't come back to the US when COVID hit. For whatever reason, their trip got delayed. So yeah, we've had to have some pricing conversations and some more, I shouldn't say pricing, but invoicing and billing conversations. And so far, so good, knock on wood, or touch wood, as some folks say. Those have gone okay. And I really feel like everybody is working together. Our industry has been pretty understanding.
That's great and really interesting. There's another comment that's come through the chat box, which I'll come to in a minute. But Maria, have you had any of those conversations with clients about pricing? Oh, I'm going to unmute. Can you unmute? You're on mute. That's it. Perfect.
Yes, we did, especially at the beginning when we didn't know what was going to happen and clients start. We had to agree on a 0 point with the clients. So we had to agree that, look, if the service will continue, then we have done so, we will continue it. So we will touch base again after 1 month to agree, or we will need to invoice after 1 month up to work that has been done so far. So this was okay. Now, and I think that the question is more on now, because there have been clients coming back and asking if we have different price lists, if we have changed our price lists. So what I can say is that, again, with people that are here and they have existing clients, that they have felt what the personalized service, there has been no question on payment. Not only, I can say that some of them have come back asking if they need to pay us some more, which is amazing. Concerning RMCs that they have come back asking for pricing, different pricing, this is yet something to be discussed on the scope of service that will be adjusted and will be delivered. So for the moment, we have had discussions, but we haven't had a price list that it's there and it's going to stay for a long time, taking into consideration the new reality.
That's very interesting. Thank you. And again, Charlie's just made a second point about the fact that, you know, the current scenario and over the coming year, I mean, I think we will revisit this topic in a briefing in its own right, because initially when we started talking about this topic, the title for this session was Extra Services, Extra Costs. So further down the line, I think we'll come to that. Fiona Mugano has just put a note into the Q&A box. Without additional costs, and while we, of course, are providing much more consultancy and advisory services, we see that clients are now asking us to lower agreed fees in view of COVID restrictions because they have lost accounts. Is anyone else seeing this? It's quite early to tell, I guess. I mean, Fiona, Fiona is talking from the point of view of immigration consultancy. We are going to see shakedowns, but has anyone seen that?
We have not, and I don't know if that's because even before COVID hit is when we put into place our virtual services. We wanted to be able to expand the services. So we had that price point or that suite of virtual services already built into our overall menu. And that's an interesting, I mean, that will be interesting because, you know, if you're still delivering, like Selina said, you're still delivering the actual product, but even adding more, I'm not sure how we could deliver cost or decrease cost. So yeah, we have not seen that yet, but that's really good, something good to think about in terms of how we're going to adapt and adjust. But you can't always get the same apple for the same price, because that same apple is going to cost the same amount. So maybe instead of that same apple, you get half of an apple, or I don't know, you get to smell the apple. Somehow
Absolutely.
there's going to be a compromise.
I mean, I think Fiona, I'm going to bring you in on a panel to deal with this, because I think that is a briefing that we need to have. We are going to be talking about different costs, different implications, like Selina said, like you said, like Maria said. So thank you very much for the questions. Peggy, over to you.
Okay, so we'll wrap up with Elizabeth, and Elizabeth will talk to us about from the education perspective. So there's probably a little bit, and again, Elizabeth in the United States, but working globally, right? Elizabeth, you're familiar with what's going on in a lot of different places. And I'll ask you the same questions, you know, what has been required of you with your company in terms of changes based on the industry and, you know, laws and regulations. And I can see there's a lot of dialogue around that. And then have you had to, or have you had the opportunity to develop any new programs, creative programs, or based on these laws or new processes? And I'd like for you to also speak a little bit about the actual basic issue of schools opening. I mean, I know we can't, that's maybe for the future, and we can't really, for the future, we can't predict it. But I think how that works with relocating families and the parents, and so take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peggy. Thank you, everybody. I think that our service line is a little bit different from, for example, corporate housing and DSP, in that a lot of our work has always been done remotely or behind the scenes. And while we might meet with a family face-to-face, or maybe accompany a family on a school visit, the bulk of our work in terms of recommending schools and, you know, being the liaison with schools and advocating for families was always remote. And so really where the changes have existed for us is in what schools have had to do. And obviously, you know, first of all, given the fact that they were closed, and that the entire concept of education, what that looks like, how it's delivered, has had to change and is continuing to change. And so, and that obviously is a huge topic, and I'll try to touch on that. So, you know, we really have had to, our role has been not so much to change our processes, but acknowledge this huge change in education and the additional level of uncertainty that families have been going through. So in that sense, our services have kind of just had to be more flexible, in that instead of always providing a traditional school finding service, counseling families on curriculum and how to go home in the future, we had many more families who were sort of saying, I really don't know what I'm doing, and help me choose an online learning program. Or I really don't know, should I enroll here or should I just go home? And what would it look like if I went home versus if I did this? And so we just sort of, our first move was to simply say, we'll just roll with it, with whatever a family needs. Our directive now to ourselves is to problem solve with them, and not necessarily to sort of try to fit each service into that menu that is our go-to menu. And I think that, you know, and you've all talked about the very human component of this, and whether it's in corporate housing, finding the balance of letting people know that the apartment is clean, but not freaking them out, or, you know, having that human touch with them, that human interaction. You know, when it comes to kids and schooling, I've always said, those of you who've ever heard me say anything have probably heard me say this, that it's the most emotional component of relocation, and it's often infused with guilt. Like, am I moving? Is this relocation putting my child at a disadvantage? Or I'm uprooting my child again. So it's always been emotionally loaded. And now all the more so, because parents are choosing schools without ever having seen them. And so, whereas before they were kind of taking their best shot and hoping that this would be a good possibility for their child, now, you know, they're taking a virtual tour and they're making that decision for their child. So our role has, I think, the consultative, if you look at our role as partly sort of logistical, but, you know, but I think our thing has always been our consultative piece about education. The importance of that piece has increased. Families haven't been able to see the schools themselves, so they're more reliant on us to say, what's this school really like? Based on everything I've told you about my child, is this really a good fit? So I think we adapted our services to just be more flexible. We also took the opportunity to do something that we wanted to do, and just trying to be helpful. We created a website, which is kind of a public service website with updates on schooling. First, it was when all the schools were closing. Now it's a reopening. So it's our COVID-19 website. And felt that was a kind of a contribution that we could make. So I think, you know, as I say, our line is a little bit different. We've had to, you know, we've had to sort of follow in all of the changes that schools have made, which have been significant. They already had the capacity to do a virtual tour. Now that's the norm. I do think one change in education is that sometimes admissions was seen as the gatekeeper, and schools have really had to bend over backwards to help families and be flexible with them and say, okay, we know that you can't go and have such and such a test done because there's no testing available right now, so we'll take another teacher recommendation instead. And the pace and the nature of the collaboration between families and schools has often been, I think, healthier. So in terms of the future, wow, that's a really big question. I think that it is inevitable, as Jennipher, Maria have said, you know, you don't, nobody goes through, no business, no industry, no individual goes through something like this without making changes. And then the question becomes, what will those changes, which ones of those changes will stay? And, you know, we were already saying, you know, the theme at one point was disruptors and creativity. And so we just have ramped all of that up, right? And I think in education, online learning was already in existence, and it was already a booming industry. And I think that obviously now it will be that way more so than ever. And right now, schools opening for the fall, when I say fall, you know, Northern Hemisphere, that most of them are planning on multiple fronts. Most of them at this point are planning for some level of in-person presence for children. Most of the European countries are planning on opening in as close to normal a fashion as possible, even if it's with some staggered classes or you know, with greater social distancing and so forth. But all of them are, I think, should be also planning for, okay, we've learned now we need to have an online program on the back burner. And so what will that be? So I think that having some version of online learning will stick with many institutions. For us, it will certainly be an added piece that we will look at when we are visiting and assessing schools. You know, one of our questions will be, how did you look after your student population during COVID? And okay, fair's fair, nobody was prepared, and some schools did it better than others, but now we're all out of the gates. What's your plan for the future if you have to reinstitute that? And that's kind of, for us, a whole new category of school assessment. I think it's possible that the question of enrollment will be redefined. That in the past, you know, you enrolled at a school meant that you showed up at a bricks and mortar institution. And that already wasn't the case with online programs. But even with some of our bricks and mortar institutions, we're beginning to see right now, at least for this year, a kind of a different approach, sort of a family saying, we want to enroll with you. We can't be there September 1, but we are committed to coming. So how about we enroll and we follow you, we join you virtually until January. And then we're there in person after that. And schools are beginning to field those questions. They're dealing with it differently, sometimes based on the fact of whether it's a returning student they already have met in person, or whether it's a brand new student or the age of the child, and they now have to navigate that and create new policies. A lot of the international schools, speaking of policies, are creating new policies in terms of deposit refunds and that kind of thing for families who want to go ahead and look for schooling, but whose relocation may fall through. So those are some changes we've seen. I can keep going indefinitely on the question of education, but I'm aware of time, so.
Well, I think those are really good points. You answered. If you hadn't touched on it, I was going to bring it up about maybe in the realm of advising parents, and of course I know that's a huge part of what you do, with different advice than you might have given.
Yeah.
And I have heard, you know, from a couple of people in the education front that just what you said, it's probably going to change. You know, in the past, when a family, say you're moving mid-year, you might not want to take your child out of the current school.
Right.
But because the physical going to a new classroom is different. But now people are going to have to learn, aren't they, how to get to know kids with as well as they can without the personal contact initially. And I think that's a very good point, that the advisory consultative part of really helping parents understand that. They probably already do, but understand that that's probably better than keeping them in a disjointed online some days and in school some days situation where they currently live. Just go ahead and start with the new situation that's going to be your new situation.
And we have advised them, you know, we've said, yes, schools are closed, but admissions is open, and admissions has always been open. So please, go ahead and fill out those applications and, make sure you have a spot for September. Don't wait until you find that your assignment is 100% definite. So, go ahead and fill out those applications. And I think also, yes, so parents have, as in all of our fields, they've been more in need of reassurance, more in need of feeling that somebody knows what they're going through and can advise them. I also think it's very different, obviously, for parents with kids of different ages. If you have a high school student who's more self-sufficient, they might need a different kind of prodding. But, and this is another whole area, those preschoolers, those little kids for whom education, development, as they develop, it's so developmental at that age, and education equals socialization.
Oh,
and without that, they cannot be educated online. They can't be. They have to touch and poke and bite and feel and smell. And that's what they are as a creature at that age. And so, those parents need a different kind of counseling.
Absolutely.
And reassurance from other ones. So
that's fascinating, Elizabeth. I mean, just at the time when probably every parent on the planet is trying to figure out how to get their children to have less screen time.
Yes.
Right.
Ironically. Yeah. Yes.
Now this.
Right. And now here's your education.
Yes, exactly. I have a couple of great points that have come through the chat. Rob Fletcher has made a point, which actually I was going to mention when Maria was talking, and this ties in very well with what you're saying as well, Elizabeth, that he's saying people need people, and never more so than when they're put into challenging situations. We've seen clients really engage with our wellness and well-being. Rob's company is founded on the basis that, it's called Heart Relo, and it's about the fact that, you're communicating on a person-to-person basis. I believe they're more open to greater levels of support for their assignees, and we've all had that conversation that, maybe, and there's another great point here from Renee Stegman at Relocation Africa. She says, we perceive, this is going back to the pricing, but wider. We perceive our clients are going to become more cost conscious. Therefore, this may have an impact on what they're willing to pay for certain services. We'll be required to develop new ways of delivering services, which is research and development, as well as adhere to additional precautionary measures and regulations, which will make the services we deliver more expensive.
Yeah.
This is going to push the entire supply chain to find solutions, ensuring we integrate the high personal touch with technology to achieve a potential lower cost solution. In some of our African markets, it's challenging and risky to offer lower cost solutions like self-service type delivery. We're going to have to look for solutions that meet compliance, duty of care, and considerations to create efficiencies. Clients may want to really look at the fact that their ultimate costs like orientation tours, therefore flights, temporary accommodation, etc., will be where they will find their cost savings. Perhaps we need to ask as an industry what their expectations are.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah. I think that's huge. I think, we can't lose sight of the customer experience. And when it comes to, high touch or accompanied services versus the virtual tour, there's not one size that fits all. But to your point, we're still moving humans, right? And we still need to make sure that we are accommodating their individual needs at what level they want and need it. But the pricing question is a really interesting one. And, I think we had noticed even before COVID that we were all getting squeezed for pricing.
Oh.
Where can we provide more value? And what we also saw is that we were seeing services being cut before COVID and seeing less of those robust services. So to us, it made sense. How can we reach more people at perhaps maybe a little bit less? So if a company wasn't going to authorize any type of destination services, well, what if we offer this instead? Will we still have the opportunity to support some of these people that maybe weren't going to get any support whatsoever? So yeah, I absolutely agree with Renee's points, and Rob's too, of course, that our heart.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have a question in the attendee list. James Spears, I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead. Nice to see you here, by the way. And James was one of my interviewees a few weeks back. How are you?
I'm very well, and yourself, Dominic? Thanks.
Good. I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, I guess it's more driven in line with the questions that have come up with regards to pricing. I manage our supply chain and I'm responsible for the procurement of services. And just from listening to what everybody's been said and what it sounds like to me, and maybe just floating an idea here at the same time, is the adaptability that we've gone through during these times have become more consultative in our approach to the standard services that we deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you think about the commodity side of what we're actually selling, it's our time. And I'm just wondering if anybody feels there's some way to really adapt along those lines and look at the commodity of what we're selling and how we bring service. I think, Jennipher, you said, no, the apple may be the same, but how you get to the apple is very different. And I really like that analogy. It comes in many different forms, but I'm just wondering if anybody's really looked at how do we simplify the pricing and make it easier to get to those apples. There's obvious scales of economy, but pushing that aside, how do we bring value into what we deliver and commoditize it effectively?
Great point. Thanks, James. It's like I say, this is a whole webinar. I mean, but who'd like to jump in?
Panelists.
I will. So yeah, being consultative has always been something that we have embraced because our philosophy is just because the client asks for the apple, they might say, I want a red apple, but we feel like we need to ask more questions because in fact, maybe they actually need a green apple and there's a better solution for them. So being consultative has always been built into how we deliver services. And we probably did that because we learned by trial and error that sometimes just doing what the client asks for or thinks what is the right thing turns out to not always be the right thing. So yeah, that's what we're selling is our time. Absolutely. And trying to come up, what we did is we tried to come up with some programs. So these virtual services that are hard to commoditize the time versus the in-person face-to-face time. It's a little easier because we know how much time the area consultant was with the relocating employee. They met them at 9 a.m., they dropped them off at 2 p.m. But when it came to the virtual services, how do we commoditize that time? And so we went to a fixed fee, a program fee for those virtual services because we wanted it to be simplified. So it's got a very defined scope in that virtual service. There is some flexibility, but it's a really defined program, and it is a simple fee. It's a simple flat fee to make it easy for everybody to understand.
That's, it's fascinating. And like I say, this is something that we'll cover in a whole series of briefing. Rob's just put a note through saying, I don't believe that everyone has truly believed in our value and the value of what we do. And certainly in a lot of the conversations that I was having with people over the past few months, that's something that we've all said, realistically now, if it was me who was being moved somewhere with my family, I would really want to know that my company appreciated the value of the transition and how it was going to impact myself, my children, Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think, hopefully, am I muted? No, I'm
not. No, you're right.
I think sometimes we talk in delicate terms and that it's sometimes helpful to really step back and say, what are we really saying here? And James, you mentioned simplicity of pricing. And so, I have to ask, do you really mean lower pricing? And maybe you don't, but I do think that there's a basic conflict in our discussion sometimes, which is assignee experience versus pricing. And assignee experience equals more money. I mean, good assignee experience, whether it's more time online, whether it's more pre-decision, pre-move, pre-arrival services. If you really want the good assignee experience, it's going to cost more. And I think we skirt around that because we talk about we talk about apps and we talk about, virtual services as lesser services, and understood, I'm not naive, we need service levels and not everybody can pay everything. But, I think as somebody in the supplier end of things, we are constantly feeling that pricing squeeze at the same time that we're being asked to deliver more for less. And there comes a point where I think we have to have that honest conversation about what, do you really want, as Dominic said, to have that family beautifully taken care of or not?
Absolutely. And
am I allowed to be that honest?
No, of course.
Sorry.
You get a response from Renee in the chat box. Oh my gosh, Elizabeth, thank you. Where does quality and compliance fall into the pricing discussion? So yeah,
I think there's an opportunity here also for renewed consultative, whether you want to call them services or just a consult, a very honest, as Elizabeth said, consult to frame the expectations with your clients. I mean, if the people, whoever is in charge of the company of purchasing the services, they don't have a good understanding of this. They might be somebody with a technology background that just thinks technology can just take over the world. So what do we need to do for? Right. So I think this is back again to the 1990s or something. I mean, where did we lose it? The understanding and the ability to get in front of our clients and just say, hey guys, this is how it is. This is why we charge what we do. And, you don't have to throw out there, well, all of my consultants have, a master's of education, so you're really getting the best quality. They need to know, the clients need to know, so they can tell the assignees what to expect. I know for sure, Elizabeth, in your world, somebody's going to get really mad if your consultant can't get them into the school that the assignee thinks is the best school in, I don't know, fill in the blank, Houston, Texas, or somewhere like that. It's happened to me.
I think it's so interesting, and this is going back to what Maria was saying at the very beginning when she was speaking, and also to what Rob Fletcher's saying. But in a way, the psychological impact of what everybody is going through over this pandemic is really affecting the way that we think, the way that we feel, the way that we interact with the world. And I do think that those companies who have large mobile populations, who want to A, manage their talent effectively, and B, show the world that they are a company with a difference. Show the world that they're a company who really do invest, care, nurture, which I think is going to become so much more important in the corporate world after this. That those will be the companies who will say, okay, I need to move these people. We're going to do this properly. I hope. And what we need to see is that the supply chain in some way responds to that. But like I said, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. I just want to piggyback on Elizabeth, and in terms of what I have found that our clients appreciate in terms of being consultative is seeing, and sometimes it's hard with services to itemize or be transparent in where the cost comes. But I have a really good example that came up during COVID, and we had a client come to us and say, there's a group of folks that are going to be landing in Austin. They're all coming in from Japan. We had no idea that they were landing. The business unit scheduled, there's 25 of them. And can you just put together some care packages and drop them off at their apartments? And I'm like, okay, sure. But let's talk about the cost. So they said, oh, well, yeah, I'm sure it's not going to be that big of a deal. The client they wanted to get their employees taken care of, and we totally understood that. But when we put the cost together of, okay, well, here's how much, paper towels and hand sanitizer and Selina, I can totally understand how your fixed costs have gone up, because for 25 people, each getting their individual care package and then them being delivered to all of their apartments, we had to go out and shop. And at that time, we couldn't even find hand sanitizer, so we couldn't include that.
You had to pay a fortune for
When they saw the cost, they were like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't, and by the time they made the decision, the people were already out of their 2-week quarantine and probably in the office. But what was interesting is I said, okay, so I can see that you're probably struggling and figuring out how you're going to pay for this, but let's talk about some of your other providers. They're in corporate housing. maybe it's already being provided. You're looking to us and we're happy to do it, but let's look to all the partners and see how we can work together. And when we talk to corporate housing, they're like, we've got this taken care of. You know, we're going to provide fresh linens. We're not going to go into their apartment and change them. We're going to hang them on a bag on their doorknob. So it just took some consultation. And yeah, it took extra time for us to say, let's step back and take a look at this. And then here's an itemization of the costs. And that is a cost of doing business. But I think they appreciated the transparency when we itemized out the cost of everything. Because they did want they did want employee experience, but at the end of the day, they're like, oh, the cost of that. But there were other solutions. So yes, it is important for cost to be cost conscious and to make sure that we all are getting paid what we deserve. You know, none of us are in this for free. So.
Exactly, and that ties in very neatly with the point that James has just put into the Q&A. All good points. I'm personally a fan of the right price, not the lowest price.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that probably sums it up. We are an hour and a quarter in. I think it's probably time to wrap. Peggy, I'll give you the floor.
Oh, please. There's so much more to say. But I know we have at least 3 more briefings that we need to put together, which is going to be great. And I just want to thank everybody so much for your thoughts. I think, again, to reiterate in the spirit of collaboration, what Jennipher just said, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, but maybe it's not, to let your clients know that you, Jennipher, are working with the corporate housing people, but the spirit of collaboration, that we're not just all providing our own little services to the assignee in a silo, and we don't have a clue what, Elizabeth is saying to the very same transferee about what's going on. So I just see so much opportunity in a consultative way with the client company, but the company that's paying you for your services, and then everything else we've talked about. Thank you so much. Again, I will reiterate what Dom said earlier. Please feel free to, I think everybody has everyone's email address. Mm-hmm. So please feel free, if you'd like to reach out to all of these awesome panelists, and they'll be happy to engage in a conversation with you and answer your questions and maybe pick up on some of your ideas, so we can all kind of march forward with this new situation we have on hand.
Absolutely. Just great note. Thank you, Sharda. Thanks so much, panelists. Great discussion on my questions on pricing. The insights and experiences shared were very interesting. Thanks for organizing this, Tom. Patricia, great presentation. Will we be able to rewatch? Yes, you will. I will be editing this into a film, and it will be up on YouTube on Friday. We'll send out a notification to everybody. It'll be on our social media. Can't thank you all enough. And also to all our panelists who made great points and great, your wisdom has been fantastic. Thank you. To our attendees, thank you so much for all of your comments. I've been making a list of people I will be contacting very, very soon about the pricing thing. So thank you all for taking part in that. Yes, you'll have the recorded presentation on YouTube. You'll be able to download it from YouTube if you know how to do that, which is quite simple. There's a thing, you just go download from YouTube and it's a thing. Sabine, yes, we have the emails for the panelists are in the very top of the chat box. I will put them in again, just bear with me. And then if you do have questions you'd like to put to anybody, here are the contact details. But really, from my heart, Jennipher, Elizabeth, Selina, Maria, Peggy, thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise. It's been a real pleasure talking with you, putting this together and getting this organized. And we'll be having many more of these briefings to come. And again, just don't forget, everybody, that we will be running the EuRA Fall Forum on October the 1st and the 2nd. Peggy and I will be sending out a call for submissions next week. We only have like 5 or 6 sessions, but we would be delighted to hear anything that you have on the theme of brilliance and resilience. So again, Jennipher, Elizabeth, Selina, Maria, Peggy, would you like to say the final goodbye?
Thank you. Thank you very much to everybody. I can't wait to get submissions for the fall conference and also to see what's in store for upcoming briefings. So watch this space.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
We'll do what we all do now. We've never ever left a meeting by waving, but now, so, Bye, everybody.